Okay, hi ecology class, ecology lab. I want to just go over a little bit of making rank abundance curves and show you some of the settings you can change. If you watched my previous video about rank abundance curves, it was based on a very small data set. So we just had like 8 taxa from some leaf litter invertebrates that we looked at. But in another lab, you're looking at moth data from the Sanders et al. Paper. So noctuid moths from Tennessee, and we've got like hundreds of species and more than 1,000 individuals. So those curves are going to be really different scales. So I want to go over how you can change some of the settings on the plot to make it look a little better. Okay, so I'm in RStudio here. I've got my working directory set. Actually, let me set my working directory. Okay. And I've got my files here that I need, my data files. So let's read it in. So my line up here, line 24, I'm going to create a data frame called moths. And that's going to be from my moths text file. I can determine species richness. Remember, we did this in lab already. You take your moths. I'm going to create a thing called moths richness from 600 meters elevation. You just use sum moths, $, tell it which column to read, and then say not equal to 0. So the exclamation point equals is not equal to 0. So I'll run that line, and we can see over here we've got 361 species at the 600 meter elevation. Here, we'll look at the data, right? So I've got all my species here in the first column, 600 meters and 1600 meters. So this is the abundance of each species, right? Okay, so 361, that L there means that it's an integer. It means there's no extra decimal points. It's not like 361.0, it's just 361. Okay, we could do the same thing for the other one, and we get 57 species, right? Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to make relative abundance in our file to be able to make our rank abundance curve. So that's these lines of code. So I'm going to add another column called proportion 600, and I'm just going to take the 600 column and divide it by the sum, the total of that column. So I'm going to run that line, and I'm going to run that line. And if we look back at our moths data set, now we not only have our raw data, but we have our proportions, right? So what proportion of the total abundance of moths is this species? And in this case, it's 0.008. In this case, it's 0 because there's none. Okay. All right, so we're going. Now we're going to make our rank abundance curve. So we've got to sort them based on each column. So I'm going to make a moth 600 and a moth 1600. And so I'm going to sort based on the abundance. So here I'm just using the order function to order them or sort them. This negative sign means I'm going to sort from high to low. And then this, after the $, this tells me which column I'm going to sort by. So I'm going to sort on those proportions. So let's run that. And then let's run that. And so those are going to be the variables I'm going to graph. Okay, so if you use the old settings from my old video, this is the kind of plot you'd get. So here we're going to go plot. We're going to plot moth 600 proportion 600. That's this one. It's already sorted. And we'll use these basic defaults, right? So color red, my point character size, my labels, and so on. So I'm going to run that and make my plot. Okay, so it comes up over here, and it doesn't look very good, right? Because we've only got 8 species here, even though we've got a lot of species. And my relative proportion of abundance is really low for all of them because we've got lots of species, right? These plot settings were based on a much smaller sample size. And then if I add in my other column, my other community, we get that. So this doesn't look so great. And we could put our legend in there too. Okay, so here's how you can mess with some of these settings. Right away, I can see that neither one of these, the highest value here, neither one of those goes above 0.02. So over here, this is the thing you want to pay attention to, my X limit. So my X limit goes from 1, oh, I'm sorry, that's my X limit. My Y limit here goes from 0 to 1, right? So we've got 0 down here and 1.0 up here. That's way too high because these lines are going to come only going to come up there. So I'm going to change my Y limit from 0 to, let's say, let's try 0.2. So 0.2 I'm going to put in there. And let's leave everything else the same, and let's rerun that and make a new plot. So run that. Okay, so that looks a little better. And then we can add our other column on here, our other line using the lines function here. And I'm going to add that one in blue. Okay, so Alt Enter. All right, so that looks a little better. Now we can change that a little bit more. We can also change our X limit, right? So our X limit here goes from 1 to 8, right? Our most abundant to our 8th most abundant. But we've got lots of species in here, right? Remember we had 361 and 57. Now I don't think we should go to 361. Here, we'll try it. So 361, let's put them all in there and rerun that. So again, I'm changing my X limit. So how long is my X-axis, or what is the scale of my X-axis? Okay, so let's run that. And we get that, right? So that doesn't look great either. And we can add our other one on there. Okay, so, I mean, it gives us a feel for the whole thing. But let's cut it off. Let's cut it off maybe around like 50 or so. So I'm going to go back here and change my X limit, right? 1 to 50. Let's try 50. Okay, so the best thing you can do to make a good looking plot is to play with those X and Y limits and see, you know, what your data should look like. Okay, so there we go with that one, and let's add this. Okay, so those look okay. One thing that I don't like is how these circles are really big at this scale and kind of override the line and makes it look like a caterpillar or something. So I'm going to change that. The way you change the point size is this CEX, and that's like the character size. So I'm going to make that much smaller. Instead of 2, I'm going to make it, let's make it 0.5. Let's make it a lot smaller and see what happens there. So again, rerun that code. Maybe that's too small. All right, let's just try 1. So 1, rerun it. Okay, that looks okay to me. And then we can run our other one. Okay. So this is getting there. It's looking okay. You know what? I'm going to change this X limit again. Neither one of these come up to 0.5. Or I'm sorry, the Y limit. So I'm going to change my Y limit to 0.15. Okay, run it again. So the nice thing about R is you can just keep running this and making the plot over and over again. Okay, all right, we're getting there. I think that's looking like a pretty good rank abundance curve. You can really kind of compare them nicely. So again, the best thing you can do is play around with these X limit and Y limit and see how, you know, what scale your axes should be. You can change the colors, of course, you know, with color. And you can change those point sizes. You know, for this blue one, I think I'm going to change that point size. I'm going to make that one like 0.75 because my triangles are bigger than my circles there. So let's make another plot. So we'll rerun that there and add my blue line. Okay, all right, I'm liking that quite a bit. Now the last thing is the legend. Now if I rescale my axes here and then I run my legend, my default legend, it's not going to show up. Watch this. I run it. Oh, it's not there. Okay, the reason for that is the first 2 numbers in this legend command shows you where on the graph it's going to go, the X and Y coordinates. So this is putting the legend at 6 and 1. So 6 on the Y-axis, or on the X-axis, and 1 on the Y-axis. So the problem here is it would be here, but our Y-axis only goes to 0.15. So the legend is way up off the chart somewhere. So I need to put it somewhere. I want to put it over here in the upper right. So I'm going to put it at about, I don't know, 40 on the X and maybe 0.12 on the Y. And that's just, you can play around with this and get it exactly where you want it. But all right, so I'm going to put 40 on the X-axis and 0.12 on the Y-axis, and let's run that. And there my legend comes up there. Okay. Oh, and this is plot 1, plot 2 from the original. So let's change that. So let's change that to, the first one is going to be 600 meters. 600 meters. And the other legend title is going to be 1600 meters. Okay, so let's make a new plot. Start with the plot command. Run that. There's my red line. The lines command will add the second line. There it is. And then my legend is going to be right there. So anyway, those are some of the things you can change to make your plots look a little better.